Michael, Levi, and Finley. Why don't we just stand here for a second and introduce ourselves? Can everyone hear? Mm-hmm. Okay, because we don't have a microphone, but we'll talk loudly. So I'm with the West 80s Neighborhood Association and Love Your Street Tree Day and Stop the Shop NYNJ. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Michael Gonzalez. I'm with Columbus Amsterdam Bid. We work on the trees in Valley.
Hi, I'm Finley. I'm with Parks, and I work with the stewardship team. So I manage the care captains with Jason, who's not here. But so if you have any questions about kind of ongoing tree care.
I'm Levi. I'm a dendrologist, and I teach trees at the New York Botanic Garden, and have been involved with the parks and various things. Went to school for forestry, so I'm just here to help with any tree questions. And I'm actually starting tree tours soon in the area, so I'm trying to get out there. There's a flyer over there. You can talk to me after, or you can look at the flyer. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
So we're delighted to join the Eco Arts Festival today that Jody and Sarah have helped organize with the BID, the Columbus Amsterdam BID. And Michael and I, who are planning this part of it, were thinking that we could do a short walking educational tour up around to 106th Street and then circle around. And then the Columbus Amsterdam BID, and Michael can talk more about that, they've been taking care of this rain garden and also the street tree beds and this little path here. So we're going to try to beautify it, and also I have some signs to donate for the tree beds. So this is our little Curb Your Dog with some educational components. So we donate those, and we'll just talk about the best conditions for the trees, for the tree beds, and the importance of pollinator-friendly plants as well. And, you know, we might talk about litter, plastic pollution, cigarette butts, dog waste. There's a lot, you know, I kind of look at the street trees as a microcosm of a lot of larger environmental issues. And so, you know, that's our plan today. And then there's, you know, more activities afterwards with environmentally focused dance and movement classes. So how does that sound? Like a plan? Okay. And then we have Anna from Columbia Journalism School.
Hi, if any of you guys are enjoying being here or not enjoying being here, I would love to chat with you, and hear your thoughts about how you heard about this.
All right, so Michael, why don't you lead the way? This is your area.
Right, so I started working with the BID in 2015, volunteering to take care of trees, and so I started going from that. This street garden, we started taking care of it for like 2018 going forward. It's been, sorry. So for 2018, we've been taking care of the street garden. Trying to add a bunch of native plants. You know, we try to keep plants that will be perennials and native to the neighborhood. Same thing to attract pollinators. So we've added some yarrow, some asters. We got some donations from the garden in the Central Park. Sorry, the name is we got some salvia over there from the Central Park Garden. We have some elderberry that we put in here a couple years ago. All things are doing okay. There is a white thyme that got planted over there. It's been a little bit of a hassle to try to take care of, but overall. But we should head south to go see other tree pits.
Tree beds.
Bed.
Right. So the new word is bed. Right. Because the pits are the pits, but the bed is the home for the tree. So I love that.
Who's in charge of that?
I don't know, but that's brilliant. Probably the same person that did I Love New York with the heart.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So what is this street tree fair day, whatever? I'm a business owner, and I just heard about this by accident yesterday.
I had a tree Oh my God.
So the problem with a tree living in the city is you're going to have a lot of people that congregate around the tree fences. People will sit here. So this is a prime example of that. You'll see bottle caps, not so many cigarette butts, but you see compacted ground. So we put in plant tree before, but they haven't survived because people will step on them, people will throw their drinks out after they finish. This tree is surviving because it's a mature tree at this point, so it can take a decent amount of damage. As you can see, it is in distress a little bit. You'll see a little bit of the suckers coming out from the roots. It's trying to get more energy, but we try to prune the sucker so that it stays mainly focused on the main trunk. But yeah, this is one of the places that we want to see. We're going to show you a range of tree beds, from well taken care of to places that businesses have adopted, to places that are abandoned, like, or not so well taken care of, like this one. Just to show you the range of what a tree bed can look like in the city and what the difference of adding tree care to it makes. That is not our program.
Is it?
That's a birdhouse that someone put up there, which is also part of why it's impacted. When people feed birds, they'll come down and they'll pick at the seeds, and eventually, like, it'll stomp them out over and over. So any like new growth will be eaten out.
But this tree seems like it's pretty decent shape.
Yeah.
Despite,
Despite all the malnutrition, it's still a decent tree. It's still, we have been watering it, so even though it does look bad,
Levi, did you want to talk about what tree this is?
Sure, this is a calorie pear, a Bradford pear. Bradford pear is a type of calorie pear tree. They're bred for their spring flowers, or they're planted for their spring flowers, which honestly don't smell good, but they're really pretty. And you'll see they're bred for abundance of flowers, which makes the fruit tiny. So as opposed to fruit, they're not technically poisonous, but they're not considered. No, they're not considered edible. They're like a crab apple. They're tiny. Yeah, and they're honestly considered a pretty bad street tree nowadays. At least the more wide branching cultivars or varieties, because they break easily with frost damage and wind. Yeah, in winter the limbs are taken down. They're trying to breed them taller and straighter. There's a new variety called Aristocrat. But
so
yeah,
this is the new tree?
this doesn't look like a new tree. It's hard to tell because the pruning, it could be kind of either. But
So how old do you think is young? The youngest? 50?
the youngest of what?
How old is it?
This one here?
20?
You could say 30 more. It's hard to tell because when they're so like drought stressed and compressed soil stressed, they often grow really slowly. There are like in really difficult areas, you find trees that are very small that happen to be the oldest, for instance, of that type of tree. I recently caught a white pine I recently caught a white pine that was 460 years old, the oldest one in the Northeast, and it wasn't very big.
So we could probably come back, whoever was interested, and do some cleanup later rather than doing it as we're going along, because there's a lot of bottle caps. So that'll take a little while. I've always wanted to do, and I've done this at some of my other events, is to do a litter audit, and then you organize litter by categories, like plastic waste, metal, cigarette butts. I don't know if we have time to do it that way today, but let's keep that as something to wish for, because it's very interesting, and then you can report it. And then I know the SWAB is here, the Solid Waste Advisory Board, and they do some litter audits as well. So let's go to the next one.
One more thing I'll mention. They do the audits.
The sanitation department does the audits.
Then what do you do?
Oh, they track it to see what type of waste is being generated, what's not being recycled, and what's being recycled.
And you shame your neighbors.
You shame your neighbors.
Finally, yeah.
So listen, before we move on.
Oh, sure, Michael.
So this is a 5x5 tree pit. It's one of the smaller ones. The bin had an addition about 20 years ago, so I wasn't around, but they tried to get the city to expand the 5x10 tree pits, which is now our standard New York City tree bed size. So a lot of the tree beds we'll see along the avenue are going to be 5x10s. I'm not entirely sure why this one didn't get expanded, but that is one of the things we pushed for before, to try to get the beds a little bit wider, to get the tree guards up so they can be, you'll see the difference between a tree with no tree guard and one with a tree guard. Even this is not as bad. So we can keep going now.
It's a tree. Yeah, so arborists
This is a perfect one to talk about. And then we'll have Finley, you can talk about it too. So this is the bigger one, right, that you were talking about, which is great. You know, we were just experiencing Hurricane Ida, and part of the problem why the sewers didn't drain fast enough, well, first of all, it was the storm of the century after Sandy, but we don't have enough green infrastructure. The Department of Environmental Protection just testified at City Council I think it was this week, and one of the things that they're going to do is to expand green infrastructure, which basically means soil, rain gardens, larger tree beds, green roofs, areas that are permeable to slow down the rain as it comes with these super storms. So it's great to have the expanded tree beds and the rain gardens, but as Michael was saying earlier with the other tree, if the soil is compacted, it kind of defeats the purpose. So you want to keep it permeable, and we'll be doing some of that with the cultivators. I think Finley, you brought tools.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then Michael, do you want to talk about all the vines?
Yeah. So there's.
Yeah.
Does it like do the trees like get
So, from what I understand, and then you can answer it, is that if there is a lot of rainwater, it can soften the roots and weaken the roots, and so that is what, in addition to like lightning or winds, that could be a problem for the trees. And that's a separate issue from the flooding that goes, into the streets. But they're both problems.
A lot of times it happens like if pruning is done incorrectly, then the branches aren't balanced, and so then that can really cause a lot of damage. Also, trees, like they live in tree time, so if you knock your head, like you'll go home and maybe later then you'll get a bump, and it's like that. Like years later, if someone ran into this tree, you might not see it now, but like 5 years there could be a storm and the root system is still damaged, and so then it will fall over.
It's also the fact that trees that are responding to drought will have deeper root systems, which serve as anchorage, even though the tree is using them to kind of have to hedge their bets if there's no rain. And yeah, what she was saying about pruning, often if they prune too much off the bottom and leave the top, you'll have kind of a fulcrum where all the wind is catching the top, where the wind happens to also be higher, and it can cause it to come down.
The root systems tend to mirror the top part.
No, it's a fallacy. The root systems generally are located within the top couple feet of the soil. They can go crazy far out. They can go way past the drip line, way past the edge of the canopy. But they don't go the same distance down as the.
Oh, but what about one of the reasons why it's so important to have a wider bed?
Yeah.
Because a tiny bed, or like if you saw that tree over there with a metal guard.
Yeah.
Like there's literally no room for the tree to really.
And especially with compaction, the roots only go where there's enough aeration for them to respire, where there's enough aeration for them to breathe. Essentially, the roots are breathing. So when the soil is compacted, roots can't actually live below a certain level. Which is why if you add like a foot of soil on top of the ground, you'll starve the roots and they'll die because they can't breathe oxygen. They intake oxygen.
You sometimes see that, so it's fun to look around. Like once I train with Trees New York in the Parks Department, instead of looking up, I'm always looking down at the tree beds, and it's fascinating. And you'll see sometimes the soil comes all the way up and is like coning it. And you just know how bad that is. Yeah.
They're basically like the main issue you see all the time is called girdling, so it's like literally strangling the tree. And so if you create a volcano around the bed, then it basically is strangling the bottom. And instead you kind of want to create a donut around the tree bed, and so that the water goes in, and also that the bottom has room.
One thing you check for as an arborist is you often want to see a small flare at the bottom of a tree. And some trees don't produce it as much. Often trees that have a lot more wind produce it even more because it's them kind of creating tension to respond to the wind. But you don't want to see a lollipop tree that goes straight into the ground. You often want to see a flare. Otherwise, it's been buried too deep.
Michael, do you want to talk about the plants in here?
Yeah.
Plants and books.
And also because
Sure.
on the same block, this one has a lot of plants, and then the next two I'm seeing there's no plants. Why that happens?
I'll quickly say that this one just got decimated a year ago by the new super, and he took out all the native plants that we had. But there was underneath that, there was the roots from this, what I think is winter creeper. It's in the euonymus family. It's very prolific. It is even climbing the tree. So it's spread. There's also this right here, which is a hosta. It can handle the shade. It's not a native. It doesn't add much for bees and butterflies or birds, but it is green.
It's a
other
couple
things in there
oak
are the
saplings.
asters. That's probably called bone set, the white flower over there. We had a bunch of those, and so they spread, and it's good for bees. They love it, and butterflies. But there's that. There's also a bunch of little seedlings. These are all little oak trees, and yep. There's at least half a dozen, if not a dozen, in there. Those are some of the things in here. The difference between the other tree pit is that it gets a lot of debris thrown in there, and then they clean it with a broom. And the broom, just the mechanical action of the broom, rips the plants apart and makes it more difficult for plants to survive. But,
So also, this is a bid area, business improvement district. This is Peter and Michael from the bid, but a lot of neighborhoods don't have bids. And so once you get trained as a tree steward, either through Tree Steward or the Parks Department, you can, especially if it's in front of your building, if your super or your managing agent is not doing it, you can steward your tree. So the idea is to give the restaurants or the building owners or tenants, ownership to do it properly. With a lot of vines, it's not recommended because of the rat problem in New York. So they can easily hide the burrows underneath, and also the vines can start, creeping up the tree. So to have, you'll see some other situations, and we have native plants today that will plant in the.
What would you do to best maintain at this point, let's say, where it is? Oh, sure. So what would you do? Somebody recommended to take all these things out.
Right. I can tell you first, so you mentioned doing the parks part, so after you do this, come find me if you want to do that training to become a steward, so then you're able to go do care not only on your trees in front of your house, but anywhere in the city. And we do kind of three main things. You take out the trash. The trash is never good, especially like concrete blocks. Also, like it looks like a rock, take it out. Take out any trash, cigarette butts, all of that stuff. Then take out the weeds, any sort of invasive species. It's taking resource from the tree, and it's not beneficial as all these other plants.
So is this all weed?
It's not all weed. It's not all weed. Well, Michael can show you kind of what stuff you would use.
a huge thing you can do, since you've got the shop right there, is pour a bucket of water on it every day. That when it's not raining, like summer.
Sort of keep an eye on
I
that.
would actually counter it a little bit with maybe like 4 buckets twice a week. Even better. The reason is because of the penetration of the water down to the roots. If otherwise, if you're putting 1 bucket on, the tendency is for the roots to be fed at the very surface, and you really want them to have a deep feeding if possible.
So in the 8 buckets are not good as opposed to 4. I'm saying if too much water is not
fine. 8
Is
buckets
this
is fine.
too much water? No.
8 buckets is fine.
So they just bring a hose and just say put some extra water in there, right?
There's a way, and we learned this. I haven't done it, but you can get a big bucket and make little holes, and then fill. Well, I guess you have to like put it down and fill it, and then it'll slowly, so that you don't have to be there, and so just slowly. Have you done anything like that?
It does compact the soil still. I would probably recommend just pouring water on it. But lastly, you do want to aerate the soil, and then we add mulch, which adds nutrients to the soil, but also provides that any sort of microbes in the mulch still go down and then continue to aerate the soil. So that's really good. I think that, and you would learn this if you do like a longer training with us. We look at it like assets. If you're thinking like all the trees in the city, when you cut them down. Con Edison Group did a project the other day in a park. They had to pay parks $6 million because literally just for the trees that they cut down, because it takes in pollution and carbon, and it makes it easier for all of us to breathe. And so because of that, I think you just think, okay, trees the asset. The older it gets, the better environmental effect it has on our city. and the more shade, the more energy saved. There's all these benefits that you have. So just focusing on basically health of tree and then those steps to maintain.
And emotionally, like there's studies that show it has emotional and social benefits. There's less crime in areas that have a lot of trees. People are happier. I mean, it's amazing, right? Like I don't think we have this totally bird. Yeah, a lot for wildlife. You know, we have this true reciprocal relationship. Like, they're absorbing our carbon, we get the oxygen. You know, we're deeply connected to the trees, and especially in this urban environment, I think they're even almost like more important. Not that the rainforest isn't important, but that's pretty.
So the other thing that I was going to quickly mention is that because our storm sewers are connected to the building sewers, it all goes into the sewage treatment plant, of which we've just got the one up at 145th Street, the riverbank. And every time there's more than an inch of rain, the sewers overflowed or overrun, whatever, and it forces raw sewage out into the river, affecting the life in the river. Over the summer, people noticed a lot of dead fish, and it's because of the lower oxygen rates, because of higher concentrations of sewage being pushed out into the river. And so the canopy of these trees absorbs a huge amount of water. It's not just from down here, but somebody else can talk better about this, but just that's one of the things that we benefit from.
Absolutely.
This area has a high asthma rate, and these trees were in part put in, and the tree pits expanded about 20 years ago with the tree guards, and that was in part because of the higher asthma rate in this area, and to try and counter that, along with the effect of being on a highway. Somebody else should really.
What do you say?
About the rain pulling the rain into the leaf.
When you think like when it stops raining, like when you walk under a tree and then the water still continues to fall, a lot of it, to my understanding, is just that it basically delays the time that then it would be falling into the sewer. So it kind of pulls it, and then it'll continue to drop and fall back into the sewer. But for a while afterwards, the entire ground like this was full of water. So, and then of course.
So we're like an old city, right? So a lot of old cities have this CSO, the combined sewage system, and I think like what DEP was testifying that it would cost them billions to change all the sewer systems in New York City, but a more affordable and greener way is expanding the tree beds, more tree plantings, more rain gardens, more bioswales, green roofs. So that's going to be the next big push.
And if you have questions about like how much your tree is like saving you money, or like how many pollutants it's bringing in, NYC Parks has a great website to see an estimate of what each tree is doing for your neighborhood. So like how many gallons of beer it stopped from going to the sewage every year.
Like you can click this tree, like go and look at the map and like click this individual tree. It'll tell you all the steps that these guys are better at, what the tree breeds, you know, the species and everything, and then also how much carbon, how much pollution, how much shade, how much energy, dollars of energy saved because of the location of the tree. So that's also a fun thing to see. They also sometimes put on like how old the tree is. So if you're deciding, oh, what tree should I take on in my neighborhood, find young trees, they're more likely to die. And then also like, yeah, find ones that you think are in need of some repair and some help. Tree guards, yeah. So if you can either build your own, and you do have to get a permit. So if you take the training, then you'll be able to know how to apply for that. Like a lot of schools, workshop classes have been building them recently with the school. There's also a thing called it used to be called Tree Trust, but now it's called Tree Time. If you make a small donation, they'll give you a tree trust. And or maybe install it. I'm not sure I can give you more info on that, but you donate to them and they'll provide this kind of
when you say small donation, it's a small donation from the point of view of a landlord. It's like $700 to $1,500 for a tree guard.
I mean,
they're lovely.
Yeah, doing a like community share almost option as well.
Yeah.
I would recommend that. Like
if you get a building in, then it's affordable. As a person, it's a big investment.
On our website, which is loveyourstreettreeday.com, we have a Q&A section, and we have a specific section on the tree guards. One of my co-organizing partners is a local business person who makes tree guards are modular. So, for example, like the smaller one there, if you were to expand that tree bed and you had a modular tree guard, all you got to do then is just add some parts to it, whereas these iron ones, you'd have to start from scratch. So there are some companies, besides my friend who does Curvalor, that make modular, and that's what I did in front of my building. We expanded 2 of our tree beds when we had to redo our sidewalk. We had the smaller ones, and it was very, cost effective just to add a couple of parts rather than redoing everything. And I think, where's Michael? So Michael, there's a couple of tree guards we wanted to point out on this walk. So let's go.
Yes, what's underneath this tree bed?
Sometimes like people honestly don't know. I mean, there's soil down there. Like, yeah, there's places where they try to plant trees, like in Soho, and like the sidewalks are like hollow, like all this kind of stuff. Honestly, like my main thing is the care of them once they're there. You don't know any.
George,
This is going down in the bedrock.
so you don't have like pipes and stuff like that?
There's pipes probably on either side of it. I don't see, there's probably some pipes over there.
But you think that basically from here to the...
Probably not pipes right here specifically.
For about, I worked as a subcontractor for the NYC Parks last fall, mainly doing surveys where I'd re-identify all the misidentified trees. But for 2 weeks, which is when I quit, they had me supervising the sawing of new tree bits. And basically my job was to call ahead, make sure they marked out where all the pipes, electric, water, everything was, and measure it, make sure we're 24 inches from gas, 12 inches from electric, make sure that we were not going through. They often sometimes measured it wrong, and when they cut in spring, they have bursts and issues like that. So, every forester, I had to call them up every time there was something ambiguous. Every forester has a different preference for how close they're willing to cut.
So interesting.
And there are spots, there's a spot over on 108 where there's a church, and it's got a vault underneath the sidewalk. And twice now, they've cut to make trees in there, and they've hit this vault and realized, oh, this is not going to work. But it's one of those odd things. But for the most part, in this neighborhood, when they go down, they're finding soil and then the bedrock. The bedrock is very close here, and it's Manhattan chips.
These are just great questions, by the way. I'm really enjoying this.
Should we move on to the next?
Yeah, well, let's go to the next.
Jen is getting on the train.
Wait. I've never been in like a really dangerous neighborhood to see if there are trees or not. It's starting to open up. It's nice.
Michael, did you want to talk about this tree guy?
Around environmental and social issues.
Michael,
There's lots of different events happening.
So this is one of our older trees in the neighborhood. Like we mentioned before, the roots will rise to the top when they need air. This is one of the ones that was condensed into a 5x10 but because we needed more space for it, the city decided to add a bigger garden, a bigger space. This is the biggest one we have in the neighborhood that I can think of.
104th and Amsterdam, we've got one that's almost, or about this size.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this a honey locust?
This is a no.
Japanese pagoda tree.
Yeah.
Japanese pagoda.
Right. Yeah, no, you're good.
And its name has changed, so it's really annoying.
Yeah, it used to be Sephora, now it's Stiphylobium, so it's a different genus than it used to be. I mean, if we can get into minutia, but that's probably not the right place.
It's where I get lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wonderful tree. It's actually got really valuable wood. They use the wood in Japan for the handles of their axes.
Really?
Woodworking. It's very shock resistant and flexible.
We're losing our ashes to the emerald ash borer, which is really a huge tragedy because it's not only a tragedy for making baseball bats, ash handles, but also for basket makers. They would traditionally make baskets out of ash, and this is a huge loss because of this emerald ash borer. So just be aware of it. And we're losing them all over the Northeast.
I was wondering how old the tree is.
It's really hard to age trees when they're in these types of conditions. You'd be better off finding out when it was planted. But yeah, because it could be growing crazy slow. I mean, the rings on a tree, if it's happy, if there's lots of sun, if there's adequate moisture for the species profile, you can get like an inch of a ring a year, or you can get like a millimeter. So I cored a tree in a swamp of black spruce. It was about this wide, about like 6 inches diameter. It was 400 years old. Likewise, you can have a cottonwood that reaches that in like 3 years. So it's hard to tell.
This tree has benefited from the expanded tree pits. It may. There was a mark. There's marks on some of them from when they were 4x4 tree pits, and they had
Bed. You're trying to get away from pit because the pit's
I use wells, beds. I use them all interchangeably. In any case, there were marks on the tree from it being constrained by a guard that went up around it, because that was being used back about 30 years ago. But the trees have grown exponentially with the larger tree pits. Tree wells.
Or well, yeah.
Yes.
By the way, marketing is always important, right?
Yes.
The use of the words.
By the way, those guards that come up this way, that come up tall, I don't know what the technical term is for them, they were originally invented because people would harness their horses to trees, and the horses would debark the trees. So they were adapted from pastoral uses, where young trees and saplings were protected from defoliation from barnyard animals. And they're kind of obsolete now because we don't have that.
So you'll see those still, and I've taken some pictures of them where sadly the tree bark is growing into those very vertical, and it's so tragic. So they're slowly removing all of them, but some of them can't be removed at this point.
Yeah, truthfully, it's not necessarily detrimental unless it goes entirely around, and in that way it will cut off everything coming up from the roots. Or actually, if it goes around, it'll cut off everything coming down, and you'll starve the roots. So if you have a guard, even a wire that goes around it, that's effectively girdling. If you have a fence the tree's growing into, the tree can be fine and swallow the whole fence. But a ring will kill it.
Right, Levi? It looks so bad.
Even a zip tie will kill a young tree.
So Matthew, you like Matt or Matthew? Either one. Already took off the holiday lights that were around a branch that was cut off. But you will see this. Unfortunately, some people leave these lights on all year round, and that's the girdling that Levi talked about. And it's really not helpful for the tree to have them all year round. I'm not sure why this branch was cut off.
I was about to say this is from that tree.
Oh, and then it was brought here.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I used to say this is a honey locust branch.
I used it as a deterrent.
I was very confused.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, you'll look around for that, and sometimes you'll see the holiday lights just wrapping all the way around and on all the time. So anyway, and then here's another example of something that is not great for the integrity of the tree guard, the bicycles, and that's why we have, ironically, an empty bicycle rack right there. But every time I walk by here, the bikes are on this, and this, this is expensive, as we spoke about, and this can, over time, collapse the tree guard. Whereas the city has put in bike racks. So I'm not sure why these are here and not there. Maybe you know.
I will say that these guards, not this one specifically, but the other ones, were the first ones that Parks approved in the city back in 1999. There was a guy named Doug Still, who was the Manhattan tree person, and he worked with us to get this design approved. It's no longer the top design. It's not because they don't like having the four sides. But these tree guards are about 21, 22 years old. So they've lasted well. The worst part of them is that the dog pee eats out the corner. These are hollow. So the dog pee will eat that out. This part has really survived very well. And just so.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you bring that up because like the modular guards I was talking about, she has as an option a urine shield splash guard that you can add to the corners, and that way it does protect the quality of the metal, and then you just have to replace that part every now and then. But since you brought up the urine and the dog waste, I don't know, Michael, do you want to talk about the negative effects of dog waste? Not to put you on the spot.
No, yeah, so often we'll come around and clean. One of the things we'll find is dog waste is very detrimental to the trees. The poop has no like actual nutrients for the tree, so it's not like it's going to compost into the ground. It's actually not that doesn't do that good for them. And the pee is really acidic, which changes the pH of the soil. You don't think about it as one dog peeing as being too much, but you get 40 people that live in this building that have a dog that will come out and walk their dogs, and they'll smell the dog here. They'll pee in the same tree, so that adds up over time.
Well, what do you suggest for people to walk their dog?
That's a good question. As far away from from the roots as possible, I would say. I know it is hard. I mean, I've walked dogs before. I've done dog walking. Yeah, just be mindful of the trees and just to be as much as possible away from the trees.
Okay. When they came up with curb your dog, which nobody really understands what that means,
right. Yeah.
it really meant bring your dog, literally train your dog when it's a puppy to the curb. It doesn't mean on the tree or on buildings. I'm seeing a lot of dogs peeing on buildings or restaurants. Curb your dog, and it takes some time, but that's what it means. But it's probably not like the best phrase.
The city actually cleans the streets, so if you curb your dog, it will get cleaned. I said the city actually cleans the streets, so when you do actually curb your dog in the curb, it will get cleaned, not as opposed to when you pee on somebody's building.
Yeah, and then you see like some dogs going like on the plastic garbage bags that our sanitation workers are picking up, and I just feel so badly that they're not considerate to our sanitation workers. So it's making that connection that we're all connected in our care for the city. Anything else on this? Should we go a little?
I'm going to quickly just point out these rocks. These are all Manhattan schist.
Love that.
And we're calling them companion stones. We're putting them into the tree pits in part because we have a hard time getting mulch sometimes. And so this is actually some mulch. There's lots of things that are growing underneath here. There's a little centipede, there's ants, there's a variety of things that help aerate the soil and make it, this is an older soil. This is a soil that's had compost, it's had mulch added over the years. So there's a lot of things going on under there. You'll find grubs that range from little 1/4 inch by 2 inches, whitish yellow. They'll turn into beetles, but you'll also find ones that are the size of my thumb that are in here. And just there's a variety of life that happens after a number of years of trying to take care of the soil. So when you start to adopt a tree, understand that things will change as you add compost or mulch in small amounts. It's not something that's going to happen right away, but it's going to be something that will happen over years, and it'll just make this a richer place for all life.
And today we had some mulch donated by New York Restoration Project, that's Midler's nonprofit. And I've trained with them on removing plastic bags and balloons from trees, so they do fantastic work as well.
And we have that beautiful mulch up at 110th Street in large quantities. And we're going to hopefully, we'll be using it up there, but then we'll also have enough, it looks like, to move it into the some of the new tree, the new beds that are being created. They've added soil there, but that soil is not very alive. It doesn't have the different things going on, and the mulch adds to that. It provides a protective layer that allows for less compaction. I mean, the other part with dogs is just that they scrape, and that's how they take care of their waste. But it rips up the roots and some of the other plants. And also there's the compaction that happens with people either stepping into the pits or dogs or even birds being in the pits. There is some compaction with that.
Should we walk down
Good question.
to the bike lane tree bed?
Sure, that'd be great.
In the tree.
There's a couple things that could have caused that.
Asking about the wound.
It seems to have healed up a bit, but as you can see from all of the wounds in different areas, the heartwood is probably all rotted out for most of this tree, which is kind of okay if you imagine that a pipe is as strong as it is. As long as the sapwood, which is the outer few rings of wood, as long as that's relatively intact, a tree can what's called compartmentalize, where it can block off its living wood from the interior dead wood that has already kind of been left alone. Okay. So often what you do when you're trying to see if a tree is okay is rather than seeing what wounds it has, you see how well it's responded to the wounds. And this tree seems like it's responded pretty decently. This growth response is pretty good. If you had a mallet, you could tap around a bunch. You could tap the roots to see if the rot has spread to the roots. When the roots rot, you're in trouble.
But that's a wound. It didn't happen naturally.
Those wounds can be caused by a lot of things. It can be caused by freezing when the tree is really young. Okay. It can be caused. Honestly, it could have been caused by vandalism. Yep.
Yeah, that's why the kind of around the tree is so damaging, because it does impact that outer layer, and so that kind of damaging that instead of this slit, as I said, is a lot. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Shall we move on? I think Melissa was hoping to get us down to the...
Yeah, I know we're going way beyond our schedule, but the questions have been amazing, and everyone loves to talk about trees. You guys are incredible. I like the passion.
So those wounds up there are typically caused by trucks that are pulling on next to either garbage trucks or dumpsters, trucks with dumpsters, things like that then hit the branches and can really twist the tree or take a full tree down.
Do you want to just mention what's going on here?
We think there's going to be a tree plant.
Can we all be invited?
Yes. Oh, yes. Come back.
Let us know.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get a tree in here. There's a lot of concrete around it. It's not very deep, but hey, they survive in other locations, so they're going to survive here. And we're looking forward to it. They've just added that soil, which is absolutely good.
That's nice looking soil.
Yes. But again, not, nothing, and it's just, so that tells you that it needs to have something else added. So anyway.
Hopefully you'll have extra mulch.
Yeah. Again, these are wounds what's happened here. It's trying to heal itself by coming in. I will say one story that I'd love to tell you is that there is a typical New York City tree, the London Plains that had termites in it 10 years ago over near Broadway.
Oh my
We
God.
cleaned out the wound, and there was still termites, but the tree has closed up and it's gotten considerable. It's doubled in its girth.
That's amazing.
And it was, it was a matter of taking care of the roots around it, making sure that it had some water, and just giving it a little bit of cleaning around the edge to make it so that it was easier for it to heal itself.
That's the first I've heard of termites in a street tree. Has anyone else had that?
This split up here is really concerning now.
Yeah.
Down here, this swelling is called like a ram's horn. In cross section, it looks like a U with two swollen areas around the wound, and that shows like aggressive response where it's trying to strengthen this side for tension, so if it bends that way. But up here, there's not the same response would, so it doesn't look good.
So one thing that I used to do, and I've been told not to do this, but also told not to do this because I was trained many years ago, is to clean this off, and so that and give it a closer, tighter, a place for it to join, and remove the dead bark. I'm not suggesting that, but it's one of those things that can help just to get rid of stuff that this is not going to come back. This is gone, and this is all gone. But right here you've got clean wood that is fresh, and it's going to eventually cover over if it's given a chance. So just I'll mention that. And, this may have been caused by that limb getting hit by a truck and twisting the entire tree and causing this wound to develop, even though it wasn't actually hit but the trauma was transferred into the trunk. Is one possibility. Anyway, notice the growth on these other trees. The tattoo parlor has orchids. And he does move them periodically.
He widens them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this tree is in trouble too, of course. And they put wire on this one because of dogs. I'm just trying to protect the plantings that they put in there. This one is in trouble, but it's holding on.
A lot of New York City trees are the true survivors.
Do you have a
they have
neighborhood
to put up
source
with.
for those lovely big rocks on the previous block?
So they've been putting out lilies. They did this whole design out by themselves. It just happens to be that the shop owner is actually a gardener, so he loves gardening, and he came out here to put out all his lilies for display. In the winter,
These are irises.
I'm not familiar with him, so he can tell you more about that if he's around. He's not around.
Okay, so
No, I don't know. He puts his own plants out here, and then anything that doesn't come out the winter, he'll repot and put it back in. This is one of the nicer ones where we have witnessed a store owner take interest, put in time and effort, and now it's like if they need anything from us, we supply with them. But if otherwise, they're doing it all right. Keep going.
Yeah.
There's a bunch that.
I think
The sidewalk. Something like
So
that.
this is interesting real fast. Here you can see what I was talking about. If this had been a modular tree guard, it would have been really easy when they expanded to just pop this out, expand it. But what you see is they expanded the tree bed, but without having the protection of the guard expanded, this is just going to be compacted soil like the sidewalk, so it kind of defeats the purpose, which is, I don't know, this is like a waste of money. It's like sad. So ideally expand this, cultivate, plant. Bulbs are really good. So we have our daffodil bulb giveaway next Sunday. If anyone needs bulbs, let me know. I'll tell you where we're going to be. And when you plant the bulbs, and then they come, not only just making the holes helps the soil, but then in the spring, they naturally decompact. So and they make it beautiful as well with the flowers. So multiple purposes. But yeah, so this, I think we want to.
Yeah. You can see the difference between the soil outside of the tree guard and then inside of the tree guard. And see how there's like little growth outside versus the growth that's inside. And there's a big difference that a tree guard can make to a tree.
Yeah. Do we? Would it make sense to move the rocks? Yeah, we're going to show you a tree guard that's not permitted and why. Because sometimes good intentions, just like the soil too high, ends up having negative consequences. I like your walking stick. This looks really pretty. I love the delicate plantings here. The soil looks good. These was always permeable between.
Correct.
Rain.
The only problem, the only problem with these is getting rid of them.
It's hard.
we can try to get rid of them.
Putting them in.
Yeah, these have been in here since they were originally placed in, so.
But I'm seeing people like building the new beaches.
Those could be the permeable ones that you're talking about. These are definitely not the permeable ones. They're permeable like pavers. Yeah. Like, at some point, this could be excavated. You know, with the proper tools. There's a lot of work. This looks really pretty, I think. This is a tree walk. Couple of different events around the neighborhood. Talk about kind of maintaining what I'm
Yeah. There's like a lot of activities.
And the houses are really beautiful. But yeah.
Later.
Yeah. It has like a kind of a nice gentle design to it, I think.
Tan bonita que no, a mí me gusta.
Perfect example of good intentions, right? That end up. Well, Levi can talk about the health of the tree, but the water can't drain out. When you have tree guards that don't have egress on the sides around, it traps it, and it could actually end up having. And the soil's too high, as Leon had mentioned. It could get mildewed. It could, flood it. I mean, this lily is really pretty. Oops. So, an easy fix would be, take out the bricks, and you have the tree guard with the water being able to flow out. I'm not sure when the bricks were put in here.
I'm not sure either. They've had bricks. This block actually has a lot of trees. They did a big job back over 20 years ago to try and get rid of drug dealers and to do stuff around trees. And they started doing this back then. And it's something that they've continued, and I don't spend much time on it.
So,
anyway.
And then the girdling with the wires.
Yeah, that is more recent, and that's disturbing.
So I've seen tree beds where they build out like concrete berm, and then they put the tree guard into the cement. It sounds like that's a really not a good thing to do. That it will, because it won't drain.
Say it once more. I'm sorry.
So there's like a cement, like maybe 6-inch cement, and then you guys are sucked into the cement.
Right.
And so there's no way for this. I can see there's dirt
right.
from underneath the bricks with the cement. So you're likely actually
right. It's like making a dam around the tree.
Okay.
Yeah. Ideally the water would be able to come off the sidewalk and feed into something like this. Ideally, if this was 10, 15 feet long, then it would be collecting the water from this 15-foot wide sidewalk. But it's not.
And also just a note, what I would be more concerned about with this anyways is the fact that if this tree is planted at the grade of the sidewalk, This is all soil on the trunk. The trunk is not really supposed to have a lot of moisture pressed up against it constantly. However, probably about half of the street trees are species that are specifically adapted to floodplain. And that's kind of unique because one, they're used to intense moisture, like flooding, and two, they're used to lack of oxygen from flooding. So what people don't realize is when you overwater a plant, what you're actually doing is starving it of water, of oxygen. Yeah. So this tree might be more capable than most to withstanding. Same with London plane trees. Those are also sycamores, half the hybrid. Sycamores are also floodplain species. And so they're kind of used to something like this, but it's still it's not good to have the grade increase of soil because this is a honey locust.
And so this tree is sort of unique in that it was about 10 years ago that it was top. It lost its entire top.
Yeah.
And Parks allowed us to keep it, and it's.
It doesn't look bad, honestly.
Yeah, I know.
It looks healthy,
but it was
if it's
basically a
unhappy,
stick.
there's no
It was
evidence
about
yet.
this big around.
Wow.
Back 10, 15
That
years
one
ago.
looks a little, these two look a little cursed.
Yeah. And in fact, topping a tree is a common horticultural use practice, especially more in certain countries like Netherlands. It's called pollarding, which is where you cut straight off. There are kind of particular rules. Arborists kind of frown on it, some arborists. Originally, it was actually used in pasture management when you wanted to sustainably harvest tons of wood from a tree. You do what's called coppicing, where you cut them at the base and they sprout back. You do that every 25 years or so, and you get abundance of small diameter, long, straight pieces of wood. When you do it in a pasture, animals will mow down the new wood. So you coppice them, you cut them flat at shoulder height so the animals can't reach the new sprouts. It then became an ornamental thing. It's now kind of frowned upon depending on who you are.
The Met has a good example.
What?
The Met has one of them.
Yeah.
So the London plane trees outside of the Met are all pollarded?
Yeah, pollarded. That's a common tree. I walked around in Denmark for a while, and every single London plane tree there was pollarded. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it looks horrible in winter, especially. Yeah, I don't like it at all, but some people do.
And you have these like bulge on the edges.
Yeah, the wound tissue kind of bulges up at the ends, and then tons and tons of sprouts come out, like we saw in that calorie pear from the base.
All right, let's go to your wish tree. 1 out of 100.
I did a 15 class and course, so that makes it really like another one is under school, so don't put in one more
Are you trying to lift me? Try one.
Then you can I don't think do something with the school
The lights are on. It's not, holiday season. Well, I guess there's always some holiday, but it'd be preferable to remove it and maybe put it up for a month,
Well, there's a time
Yeah, they were. They did it very nicely with all good intentions. That way, how bad it is. I mean, it does look kind of pretty.
like 2 weeks ago when I was here, he was a lot jealous about that. I took a picture of him.
Okay.
Sorry, excuse me. What do you think? This is the mystery plant. I'll tell you. Wait, what was that show?
Anyone want some shade?
The Eden plant?
So this This is an invasive tree. It is incredibly strong. We took out the roots down 2 feet. We took out a stump about this big around. It was only a year and a half old. And it's come back, and you can see how big it is. Even though, we thought we had gotten all of it.
This is a couple of months old, by the way.
Yeah. This just grew up in the past 2 months.
It's a really nice cabinet wood.
Oh, there you go. Okay, good. But it's got lots of seeds that come up all the
Beautiful.
So, in any case, this is a spot that we hope to get planted soon. With a tree that we
A native tree.
yeah, that will survive here. Something that would be. This is called Polonia. It's and it doesn't feed the birds or the bees or the butterflies as much as a native would.
Where's
Somewhere in Asia. Actually, yeah, probably know that.
Somewhere in Asia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is a
princess
small
tree.
area.
Princess tree is the main common name. Yeah. It looks a lot like our native catalpa. The main difference is our native catalpa has 3 leaves that come out of a single node or a single point, whereas this is opposite. This has only 2. You'll also see the catalpa pods are long. They're like this long and they're really narrow. They look like string beans. These don't have pods. These have a whole bunch of these brown-looking fruit that come up in like a bouquet. And you'll see it on a more mature tree. This one's not ready to produce them yet.
If you want to find a more mature tree, there's one on 100th Street on Columbus in the Frederick Douglass Parks.
Yeah, huge.
It is insanely huge.
Yeah, they have really beautiful flowers. If it helps, that's why they were planted. Most invasive trees. Yeah, most invasive trees that we find around here were originally planted for some use, normally ornamental, and then we realized they kind of have a proclivity for getting away into the woods and into other urban settings. A good example is Atlantis tree of heaven, which was like a mainstay of planting all over the West, including the U.S., including Washington and New York, and then it was kind of outlawed strictly in like the early 1900s.
So one tree that has been introduced to New York City was, I mentioned 20 years ago how Doug Still worked with us from Parks on tree guards. He also introduced in this area the Kentucky coffee tree. And it is,
I like that tree.
He personally heralded it, pushed it, and we started it up in this neighborhood, and now we have a number of them. So when you get a chance, look it up. There is one up the block. We need this.
So is it native?
I believe it's native. I don't know much about it.
It's actually technically native to a really small part of New York State. It's listed on the New York Flora Atlas as being native, which is crazy because it's usually a Flora Western. They kind of found it when they crossed the Ohio River, and I think what plain species just like honey locust, and never really had much use. They ground the beans for coffee until they got real coffee, and they stopped.
Before we leave here, can we turn around and so the tree with the light.
It's a corn.
Yeah. I think it's corn now. There's enough hybrids now at this point that it's kind of hard to tell. But I guess you're not injecting it, so it would have been pretty dead. Our American elm used to be like probably the most legal American tree. And it's recently been kind of killed by 2 diseases, Dutch elm disease and elm yellows. So most of the elms you'll find around here, except I think the big ones that are probably vaccinated or whatever you call it, down on yeah, that word just kind of rolls off the tongue now. But there's a bunch of huge, incredible elms that you'll find almost nowhere else on Riverside.
The other place that you'll find them is up on the Great Hill.
Yep.
And it's out there in the middle of winter. And just look at the branches. These trees are incredible.
How are they different than the elms on Chicago Walk?